Before you close your eyes tonight, consider a question that has haunted historians, philosophers, and ordinary people for more than 60 years. What does the face of mass murder actually look like? If you picture it, you probably imagine rage, wild eyes, a snarl, the theatrical menace of a villain who knows exactly what he is. But the most consequential architect of industrial-scale destruction in the 20th century looked nothing like that. He wore a pressed uniform. He kept a tidy desk. He filed paperwork. He caught the bus home from work. He was a man who could have managed a shipping company, a railway schedule, a distribution network. And in a way, that is precisely what he did, except the cargo was human lives, and the destination was annihilation. His name was Adolf Eichmann. He was not the man who gave the orders from the mountaintop. He was the man who made the orders work. And that distinction between dreaming of something monstrous and actually making it happen is what places him at the very center of one of history's most studied crimes. If there had been no Eichmann, historians have argued, the logistics of the final solution would have collapsed under their own weight. He was the thread that connected the ideology at the top to the railcars at the bottom. He was, in the most chilling sense of the phrase, the manager. Tonight, we are going to follow that man from the beginning to the end. We will walk beside him from a forgettable childhood in the industrial heartland of Germany, through the corridors of power in Vienna, Prague, and Berlin, to the quiet suburban streets of Buenos Aires, where he thought history had forgotten him, and then into a glass booth in Jerusalem, where the entire world watched him account for himself. This is not a story about a monster from another world. It is a story about what ordinary ambition, bureaucratic loyalty, and the slow erosion of conscience can produce when placed inside a machine designed for destruction. If you are watching this late at night, let this be the story that settles into your mind slowly, the way all the most important truths do. Stay with us. This is a journey through one of the 20th century's most significant and disturbing lives, told completely, told carefully, and told so that we never forget. If this kind of deeply researched, long-form history is what you come here for, you are in exactly the right place. Hit subscribe and let us walk through history together. Chapter 1. A Child of Solingen. On the 19th of March, 1906, in the industrial city of Solingen, in the German Rhineland, a boy was born into a family of modest, respectable Protestant middle-class stock. His father, also named Adolf, was a bookkeeper and later a small businessman who provided his family with the kind of careful, ordered life that defined the aspirational German bourgeoisie of that era. The city of Solingen itself was a place of craft and industry, famous for its steel blades, its disciplined manufacturing, and its civic pride. An unlikely birthplace for a name that would one day carry the weight of history. The family was not wealthy, but they were solid. They were not prominent, but they were proper. And for the first 7 years of his life, young Adolf Eichmann grew up in the rhythms of a city that valued precision and order, qualities that would, decades later, serve the worst purposes imaginable. In 1913, the family made a move that would quietly shape the rest of his life. Eichmann's father relocated the household to Linz, in the Austrian province of Upper Austria, a city that carried its own strange historical gravity, for it was also the city where a young Adolf Hitler had grown up and held his earliest, most formative memories. The two men never met as boys. They moved in entirely different circles, separated by age and circumstance. But Linz would mark them both, and the city's particular brand of German-speaking Austrian nationalism, its resentments and its cultural aspirations, would run like a current beneath the lives of both men well into the most destructive decade the continent had ever known. For Eichmann, Linz was the place where childhood became adolescence, and where the comfortable certainties of his early years began to dissolve into something less defined. He was, by most accounts, an unremarkable student. He did not excel academically. He began a course of study in mechanical engineering, but did not finish it. This pattern of beginning something, of being capable of understanding systems and processes, but of not completing the formal credential, would recur across his early adult years in ways that quietly frustrated him. The world around him in the 1920s was also fragmenting. The Great War had ended in Germany's defeat, and the economic consequences rippled across the border into Austria with particular cruelty. Inflation, unemployment, and a pervasive sense of national humiliation made the 1920s a decade of instability for young men of Eichmann's background. Men who had expected a clear path and found instead a landscape of closed doors and disappointed expectations. It was this frustration, shared by millions, that made the promises of rising political movements so seductive. After failing to complete his studies, Eichmann moved through a series of occupations with little distinction. He worked briefly as a laborer in his father's small mining enterprise. He tried office work. He eventually found his footing, such as it was, as a traveling salesman for the Vacuum Oil Company, a position he held from the late 1920s into the early 1930s. The job suited a certain aspect of his character. He was organized. He could follow a route. He could manage accounts and relationships with the cool efficiency of a man who preferred systems to spontaneity. But it was not a position of power or prestige, and the young Eichmann was, beneath his careful surface, deeply aware of the gap between where he was and where he believed a man of his type ought to be. That gap was the space into which ideology would pour itself. The 1930s arrived in Europe like a door being kicked open. The Great Depression obliterated what remained of economic stability across Central Europe, and Eichmann, like hundreds of thousands of others, lost his position at the oil company as businesses contracted and workers were let go. Unemployed, adrift, and living in a city that felt increasingly charged with political electricity, Eichmann encountered an acquaintance who would alter the course of everything, a man named Ernst Kaltenbrunner. Kaltenbrunner was a fellow Austrian, a lawyer, and an enthusiastic member of the National Socialist movement that was reshaping German political life across the border. He suggested to Eichmann that the movement offered not just an ideology, but a career, a structure, a uniform, a sense of belonging, and, critically, a ladder to climb. On the 1st of April 1932, Adolf Eichmann joined the Austrian National Socialist Party and the SS. The decision was made not out of passionate ideological conviction in the way that some of his later colleagues would describe their own radicalization. It was made, by most historical accounts, with the cool calculation of a man looking for employment and identity in a world that had offered him neither. This is one of the most important and most uncomfortable facts about Eichmann's story. From the very beginning, his relationship to the movement was transactional as much as it was ideological. He wanted a career. He wanted to be somebody. The movement needed organizers, administrators, men who could process files and manage logistics without flinching. In that sense, the match between Eichmann and the Nazi Party was less a seduction and more a hiring. The horror of what followed was built on something disturbingly mundane. A man looking for work, finding exactly the kind of work that would make him one of the most studied figures of the 20th century. The Austrian government banned membership in the Austrian Nazi Party not long after Eichmann joined, placing him in an awkward position. Like many Austrian Nazis who suddenly found their political allegiance made illegal in their home country, Eichmann crossed into Bavaria in Germany, a country that had just handed power to the National Socialists under Adolf Hitler. In August of 1933, he joined what was called the Austrian Legion, a group organized for Austrian Nazi Party members who had fled across the border. There, in a camp environment, he received several months of military training, his first experience of the kind of institutional discipline that would define the next decade of his life. The training was not spectacular. His performance was not remarkable. He was, as he would remain for years, a competent and diligent mid-level figure, the kind of man who does not stand out in a room, but who keeps everything running when the meeting is over. The move to Germany was, in retrospect, the point of